Hi guys. Just a second. Captions, music, and we are good to go. Hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone joining from different horizons. So today we have gathered here to understand the basics of the Australian continent, wherein our special guest of the day, he will be taking us to the journey and he will be explaining us about the benefits and reasons why people open the company in Australia. Along with it, he will also throw the lights on the other technical topics related to the company, taxation, bank accounts, and so on. Hi, my name is Kapil Talreja. I'm from Talreja and Talreja, and I'm glad to host the event today. And I'm fortunate enough for hosting today's special guest, CA Jimit Doshi. Also, wishing all of you the festive greetings on the occasion of Rath Yatra, which is also one of the great festivals that is celebrated in India. Hi, Jimit. How are you?
I'm good, Kapil. How are
Jimit, can you
you?
hear me?
Yes, yes. Can you hear me?
I think your voice is not audible.
Okay. How about now?
Jimit, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear
Just a
you.
second.
Hello. Yeah. Can you hear me? Hello. मेरे को आपकी आ रही है मेरी आवाज नहीं आ रही है आपको? अच्छा। ऑडियो ऑडियो इनपुट में। हेलो। हेलो। आ रही है अभी? नहीं नहीं मतलब कैन यू चेक इन द restream? हेलो। या।
So, guys, are you able to? Can you see the screen? If you can just comment in the chat box, I'll just open the chat box as well, so that we can see whether you are able to listen to us and you can. Your the screen is clearly visible to you. Let me open the chat box so that design is there. Perfect. Hmm. Guys, can you please comment in the chat box so that we can see whether you are able to listen to us? If you can just type in the chat box, as you have logged in through YouTube, you just need to comment in the YouTube channel below it. You will be seeing the chat box present there. Let me do it for you. Just a second. Yeah, loud and clear. Amit is saying voice is okay. Perfect, perfect. So, let me introduce you first of all with the Jimit. Uh, First of all, thank you, Jimit, for accepting the invite, for being the special guest for the event. Even though you are caught up in the seasonal work related to Australia, you still managed to take out at least an hour for us so that we can understand from you regarding all the Australian matters that you are going on. Uh, so, Mr.
Thank you.
Jimit, ideally, yeah, let me share the screen as well so that people can see. So Mr. Jimit is ideally he's a CPA Australia as well as a CA from India. and he's also a commerce graduate specializing in accounting and finance. He's the head of the Australian region of Collab Accounting Private Limited. That's the offshore accounting solutions. He's in particularly in the offshore accounting solutions in the department. He has a vast experience of working hand in hand with CAs, CPAs, and other business owners in Australia. He's skilled enough in cloud accounting. He believes in the process automation and keeps a goal of becoming an expert in the digital accounting. He also holds a QuickBooks and Zero Advisor certificate, and his professional expertise allows him to bridge the gap between the client expectations and delivery. Now, I would request Mr. Jimit to take over the session, and we can straightforward start with the technical topics.
Thank you so much, Kapil Bhai, for the detailed introduction. And thank you everyone for joining today and taking out the time on a Sunday to join this webinar. Let's quickly jump into. I'll share my screen as well. Just confirm whether it's visible to you or not.
Yeah, it's clearly visible, Jimit bhai.
It's clearly visible. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right. So, basically today we are here together to understand how to set up a company in Australia, and then, as Kapil Bhai mentioned, other implications of setting up benefits and implications of setting up a company in Australia. So, yeah, first of all, let's start with a little introduction for myself. But as Kapil Bhai mentioned, most of the introduction he has given for me, so I don't need to introduce myself. But just to add on to what Kapil Bhai said, basically. I cleared my CA in 2018, and then since 2018, I'm into Australian accounting and tax. I'm based in India, and I'm based in Ahmedabad. And so basically, uh, you know, um, like since 2018, I've been into Austrian accounting and tax, and so even if I want to file my Indian tax return, I need to get in touch with my partner. And sometimes a lot of friends and relatives think that I'm a CA in India, so they come up with a lot of questions. And but then the only option I have is to connect them with my partner. So that's my extension knowledge in Austrian accounting and tax. And so, further, a little introduction about our company. So, we started Collab Accounting in 2019, and initially we started as a small firm. When I say we, like we have a group of partners and a group of companies, and Collab Accounting Australia is one of the companies in our group. So we do have an Indian CA firm in the name of Ankit Chokshi and Company, and Mr. Ankit Chokshi is our senior most partner, and he is into practice since 2001. And we also do outsourcing and other accounting services in other countries like UK, USA, as well as we have an IT company as well, which does outsourcing work for all multiple countries in the field of IT. So that's our setup. And especially when I talk about Australia, so we started in 2019, and then we initially started with the bookkeeping work, and then we ventured out. As and when we grew, we expanded into multiple clients, which was not limited to bookkeeping. We started with bookkeeping, and then we had onboarded a lot of accounting firms who outsource their clients work to us. And as well as we recently started the direct accounting services in the taxation and secretarial services, since I became a tax agent recently as well. So so along with a CA and a CPA Australia, I'm also a registered tax agent in Australia, and we also provide direct taxation and tax compliance services to Australian clients. Um, so these are the services that we provide. So let's say financial reporting. The financial reporting basically means the year-end accounting, just like we do in India. The year-end accounting includes profit and loss account, balance sheet, and the detailed GS scrutinies and the year-end adjustments and all those things, and then issuing a accountant signed financial statement. And The other part is the taxation. So taxation basically includes the preparation and lodgement of different types of tax returns for different types of entities. And one of the services BAS or IAS. So BAS is called Business Activity Statement, and IAS is called Installment Activity Statement. So in Australia, uh, as compared to India, we in India we lodge different tax returns for different types of taxes. For example, for GST we have a different tax return to be lodged. For TDS we have different tax return to be lodged. But in Australia, as well as for advanced tax, we have a different tax return to be lodged in India. But in Australia, they have a combined tax return for all these three taxes. So that's why it's called a business activity statement. So business activity statement reports GST as well as your TDS as well as your advanced tax together. And yeah, so the next part is SMSF compliance and audit. So SMSF is called self-managed super fund. So we will just a brief about what's SMSF. So in Australia, similar to Provident Fund in India, in Australia it's mandatory for the employers to pay an additional 11.5% to their employees on and above their gross salary. So this is mainly for the retirement benefits of the Australian people. And so there are different types of super fund, but one of the super funds that are managed by the person who owns the super fund is called a self-managed super fund. So it's a separate legal entity, and there are different types of compliances and separate law for self-managed super fund, and that also needs to be audited as well as, see, it's a separate legal entity. The tax return needs to be lodged and financials needs to be reported. So yeah, that's SMSF. Then the next part is detailed bookkeeping services. So as mentioned, bookkeeping all of us knows. So in India, like when we say accountant or accounting or something, it basically means the day-to-day data entries and all those things. But in Australia, when someone says accountant or accounting services, that essentially means what a CA does in India, and the data entry is termed as bookkeeping in Australia. So the detailed bookkeeping services are also given by us, where a lot of business owners and especially we specialize in retail businesses. So currently we are looking after more than 80 retail businesses, and we do very exhaustive bookkeeping and other reconciliations for the businesses in Australia. Then we also provide secretarial services. So secretarial services includes incorporation of companies, trust, SMSF, and then other related services. Let's say change of name, change of address, change of shareholding, directorship. All those things are part of SMS secretarial services. We also provide remote admin or virtual assistant to the clients in Australia. So, for example, let's say there's a mortgage broker, a finance broker who needs an admin staff. Then we also provide remote admin staff to those kind of business owners or the professionals in Australia. And other miscellaneous services includes, let's say, monthly reportings. We also offer Power BI reports to a lot of clients. So yeah, a lot of other services. So when I talk to a client, basically we say that whatever work you need can get done from our office if it's possible virtually. If something does not require a physical presence in Australia, then that can be done from our office. So, yeah. And then coming back to the main topic for which we have gathered together today here is the journey to company setup in Australia. So we will be discussing a few points over here. As mentioned, let's say we'll start with the benefits of opening a company in Australia. What are the different types of legal entities in Australia, and what is the taxability for each type of entity? What are the different types of taxes in Australia? What's the timeline for setting up a company in Australia? And what are the initial compliances or the considerations that you need to make before you decide to set up a company in Australia or at the time of setting up a company in Australia? And then what are the recurring annual compliances? So, Kapil bhai, just am I audible, and is the pace okay? If
Yes,
you
yes,
have.
yes, everything is going smooth. No problem.
Okay, perfect. Okay. All right. So coming back to the benefits of opening a company in Australia. So as you all might know, that Australia is a country as well as a continent, and it has got a very huge area in terms of the land area. And as compared to a very huge land area, they have a very less population. So if you see the map of Australia, the major cities or the majority of the population, they are only located on the coastal areas of Australia. So why am I saying that this is a benefit? Because as you know, Australia, the population in Australia is increasing on a continuous basis because they are doing, and most of the population that increases in Australia is by way of migration to Australia from different types of countries, and not by the, the existing population and the, uh, so, and another thing, like basically Australia was initially, if you, it's an interesting fact, like I'm not sure if everyone know this, but initially Australia was used as a jail for the criminals of UK or London for the British Empire. So the criminals of UK were sent to Australia and they lived there and Australia was treated as a jail for them. And then from there, the it was converted in a country. So that's an interesting fact. But then what I mean to say is that there is no, because the original Australian people, when you say it, they are very less in population, and it's almost a 50-50 ratio of the migrants in Australia and the local Australian people. And the local Australian people are also originally from UK or British Empire. So, because of the increasing population, there is a lot of demand and there are a lot of opportunities that keep coming up in Australia. So, as an outsourcing company, sometimes we might feel that each and every CA in India now, right now, is trying to get a foreign client, and because of this, there's a lot of competition increasing in the market. But then, still, we are okay with that, and we are not very much worried about it because we know that in Australia there are a lot of opportunities because of the increasing in population. And yeah, so that's the main reason why Australia is a sorry, why Australia is a good market to start a business or open a company in Australia. Then there are multiple dynamic industries in Australia. So in Australia, mining is a major industry, and since Australia is kind of like a island, there are a lot of minerals and resources in Australia, as well as a lot of mining companies are there. Gautam Adani has the biggest mining site in Australia, owns the biggest mining site in Australia. Then mining is there, and then there is a lot of agriculture as well in Australia, and along with that, there are a lot of technology and other industries. So as compared to USA, in USA the uh, mining and the agriculture is very minimal, and USA is more focused on the financial and the IT sector. But in Australia, there are all of these industries are together, and that is why again, all types of businesses has got a lot of opportunities in Australia, and it's a strong and steady economy. So the Australian dollar as compared to India. So since past few years, it's ranging between 50 to 55, and sometimes right now it's around 55. So it's a strong economy, and that is why. So let's say our counter company, our sister company, Collab Accounting UK Private Limited. So they are serving to UK clients. So the economy of UK is right now not so good, and because of that, we are also facing the effect of it, that the business that's coming has slowed down. But as against that, Australia is a booming market and a booming economy. So that's why, again, a good point to start a company in Australia. And one example, the economy for Australia is good because, let's say, if we compare to going back to COVID-19, so in Australia, the government gave a lot of benefits to the businesses in Australia. So that included JobKeeper or the cash flow boost, and so these were actual benefits and the actual funds coming to the bank account of the business owners, which helped them to survive in the during the time of COVID. And even after giving a lot of benefits, the economy is still steady. So again, this is a very good example as compared to India. Like in India, the benefit that was given by the government was not very actual. It was just something that's on paper, and it was only in the part of loans or something. And there's a skilled workforce in Australia. So there's a concept called skilled migration in Australia. So most of the people that migrate to Australia are either students, so who study there and then become, they are all very educated and with good qualifications, or else there's a concept called skilled migration, which, so the government of Australia, they put out the requirements of different types of professionals. For example, let's say they have a requirement of certain number of accountants this year. They have a requirement of certain number of doctors this year. So the migration is a skilled migration. So whatever population is increasing is also a very high quality population. So that is why again it's a benefit, because since the population is very educated and qualified and and professionals, uh, there's a huge demand in the market, growing day by day. And there are multiple financial options. So when I say financial options, uh, I mean that the to get loans in Australia is much easier as compared to India or any other country. So if you want to start a business, and if you want to expand your business, then the loans, or there are multiple financial options. So there are loans, and then there are top tier banks, there are second tier banks. So sometimes if the top tier banks are not available for you, then the second tier banks are also very flexible in providing the loans to you, and so that this will be very much beneficial if you want to expand or start a business in Australia. And another point, touching back to our setup, so we do have partners in Australia who are mortgage brokers, who have got 20 years of experience into finance broking. And so yeah, again, this is, so basically our setup is in such a way where we have got Indian CA practice, we have got Australian practice, we have got UK practice. In Australia also we have associates who are into migration, we have associates who are into legal practice, and who are also into mortgage broking. So that's our entire setup and our associates. And the time zone and the location of Australia. So again, if you are planning to do a business, you might think of traveling to Australia. So as compared to other countries like USA, I'm taking an example of USA again and again because that is something that's most. Uh, USA is the one where we started the outsourcing, and then Australia recently started in around 2000 or 2005. So as compared to USA takes you around 30 hours to reach from India to USA. But Australia, from Ahmedabad to Sydney, you can reach within 15 hours. So that way it's more convenient. And the time zone in USA, it's a completely different time zone. It's day and night. The difference is day and night. But in Australia, the time difference is just 4.5 hours. So right now, from between April to October, the time zone is just 4.5 hours. And I'm talking about the major cities. In Australia, also there are different time zones, but I'm talking about major cities like Sydney and Melbourne. So the time zone is 4.5 hours right now, and between October, from November till March, the time difference is 5.5 hours, and they are early. So if you plan to start a business in Australia, then they start 4.5 hours earlier from us. So you can shift your timings a little early in the morning. Our working hours are 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. A lot of clients do ask us if we can start early, but then even if we start at 9 a.m., we have an overlap of around 4 to 5 hours with their working hours. So that's more than sufficient. And most of the communication or the meetings take place in the first half between 9 to 12 or 1 p.m. Indian time. And the next point is the multinational population. So when I say multinational population, as as mentioned earlier, that in Australia, most of the people are migrants from different parts of the world. So Indians are one of the majority migrants. The first one is the Chinese, the second are the Indians, and then so on. There are other population as well. So and Australia is a very community based country. So for example, if there's a person who is an Indian staying in Australia, then his entire world will be around Indians. So he'll be, all the services that he gives or gets, that will be under his Indian community, with his Indian community. And the same thing is also applicable for the Australians or the Chinese. So if we have a client who's a Chinese accountant, so we see that most of his clients are Chinese. And when we are also working for an Indian accountant, India based, Indian national accountant who is based in Sydney. So most of his client base are Indians. So because of this, being an Indian, it's very much, you know it's easy to get work from Australia, if you get in touch with Indians. And it's obviously not very much limited to just the Indian population. Obviously, we do have clients who are Chinese, we do have clients who are Australians, but then it's easier because the Indians would prefer giving work to an Indian. That's the main reason. And the last point is the double tax avoidance agreement. As you all know, that we have a DT double assigned with Australia. India and Australia has a DT double assigned, and it has got a DT double assigned with a lot of other countries as well. So I assume there are people from other than from India as well joining today's webinar. So Australia has got DTAA with most of the major countries, so that is why there won't be an issue of double taxation. So yeah, so that's the benefits of opening a company in Australia. And these are the different types of legal entities. There are a lot of other legal entities as well, like a joint venture and other stuff, but then these are the main ones. So obviously an individual, then there is a company, there's a partnership firm, there's a trust, and there's an SMSF. So for companies also there are different types of companies, but the major two are the private company and the public company, just like in India. And private company is also called a proprietary company in Australia. So, in India, we write Collab Accounting AU Private Limited, PVT Ltd. In Australia, it's called Collab Accounting Pty Ltd. So, a private company is also called a proprietary company. So, it's called Collab Accounting Proprietary Limited, Pty. And there's a partnership and trust. So trust there are different types of trust as well. There could be a family trust, which is also called a discretionary trust. Then there's a unit trust, there's a hybrid trust. So different types of trust are there. And as mentioned earlier, SMSF is also a type of legal entity. But then there's a different law and there are different implications and provisions for the SMSF. So again, if you being an Indian, or I'm not sure about other countries, but being an Indian, if you're planning to start a business in Australia from India, then it is mandatory that you do a business only by investing in a company in Australia, or only by incorporating a company in Australia. So this is something that's the provision of RBI or the FEMA regulations in India. So the the overseas direct investment, the ODI rules do not allow Indians to invest in an entity which is not a company in other country. So that's why it's compulsory to in only open a company in Australia if you want to start a business in Australia. So that is why our today's webinar is solely based on opening a company in Australia and not any other legal entity. So, what are the key elements of a company? So, this is more or less similar to what we have in India. It's a separate legal entity, and it's a more complex business structure as compared to individuals or partnership. Trust is more complex than a company as well, but as compared to individuals and partnership, company is more complex. But then, as mentioned earlier, it's compulsory or mandatory to only open a company and do a business through a company in Australia if you are based in India. And yeah, a company involves higher setup and running cost as compared to other structures like partnership or individuals. And uh, basically, the companies in Australia are governed by the Corporations Act 2001, the Corporation Act 2001 in Australia. And just like we have MCA in India, the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, the governing authority in Australia for companies is called ASIC, ASIC, and the full form is Australian Securities and Investment Commission. So ASIC basically is we have different governing authorities in India. So MCA is for companies, and then SEBI is for the stock market. But in Australia, ASIC regulates stock markets as well as the companies. So yeah, and then a company basically, obviously it's just like companies in India, the companies in Australia are controlled by directors and owned by the shareholders, and they have a limited liability, and obviously it's a separate legal entity. So whatever profit or income that the company earns is owned by the company, and then the company is taxed on the profit that the company has, and then after that the taxable after tax profit is then distributed as dividends to the shareholders. And obviously if it's a company, you have got wider access to capital. It's easier to get loans or any other investments or capital investment from other parties if you have got a company as compared to an individual. And just like India, so this is a very recent provision in Australia. Earlier they did not used to have this, but now director's ID or a director identification number is mandatory in Australia. And so Australia is learning a lot from the Indian provisions, because as and when they move further, they think that India has got more complex and more stringent laws as compared to the operations of provisions of a company or income tax. So they are learning a lot from India as well. And so the taxability of various types of legal entities. We'll quickly go through this one because, as mentioned, if you want to start a business from India in Australia, this is not very much relevant to you. But if you are someone who is based in Australia, then just a quick. It's also slab rate for individuals, just like we have in India, and the slabs are like this up to $18,200. There is no tax, and this is not applicable for foreign residents. This is only applicable for the tax residents of Australia. For foreign residents, the taxability is 32.5% from the first dollar you earn. And yeah, and these are the slabs. So obviously, I think so. Kapil Bhai will share the PPD with you guys, so you can have a detailed look afterwards. But yeah, so the maximum slab rate goes up to 45% plus 2% medical levy, so that comes to 47%. So above, if you have got an annual income of more than $190,000, then the top slab is at 47%. And partnership and trust. So partnership and trust are not taxable entities. So, let's say there's a partnership firm operating a business, then whatever profit the partnership firm has for a particular year, that will be entirely distributed in the ratio of partnership to the partners. And same way is the case for a trust. If a trust is doing a business or earning any kind of profit, even if it's just for investment, the trust, then also whatever profit is there in the trust for that particular year needs to be distributed to its beneficiaries. But then discretionary trust is something where the distribution of profit can be done in in any way which is more suitable from the tax planning perspective. So let's say there's a family group who has got a husband and a wife and the family trust. Then the whatever profit is there in trust can be distributed to the husband and the wife in any ratio which is more suitable based on their individual level of income, and to utilize the lower slabs of their individual income. So this is something very much useful in tax planning. And so coming back to the companies, so for the companies, there are two types of tax rates, and for two types of companies, one is a base rate entity, and the tax rate for a base rate entity is 25%, and otherwise it's 30%. So what's a base rate entity? So there are different thresholds given for a company to be defined as a base rate entity. And so one of the threshold is the turnover, and the other requirement is the company needs to be doing a business, and then the definition of business is also given. So you can have a detailed look at this as well. And sorry, I forgot to mention, but just like we have got the income tax department governing the income tax in India, all the taxes in Australia are governed by an authority called ATO, and the full form of ATO is Australian Taxation Office. So if you want to do any further research which is with regards to anything related to accounting and taxation in Australia, the website of ATO is very much user friendly. You can just quickly go to the website of ATO, and then you can have a very good research on it. And as mentioned, SMSF is also a separate legal entity, and the tax rate for SMSF is 50%. But then SMSF is something is which is only used for the retirement benefits. So if you put any dollar or any money in SMSF, the only drawback is you won't be able to utilize that fund till the time of your retirement or till the time you become 60 years of age. So this is purely for retirement, and normally SMSF is not used for doing businesses. SMSF is only used for doing investments, which you do for your retirement for benefits. And the different types of taxes in Australia are similar to India. They've got, and these are the major ones. Obviously, there are a lot of different other taxes as well, but these are the major ones. So, which we in the normal day-to-day operations we come across these types of taxes. So, the first one is income tax, which is a federal tax. So, just like in India, we call it central government and state government. In Australia, it's called federal government. The central government is called federal government, and the state governments are also called state governments. So, income tax is a federal tax. GST is also a federal tax. So, there's no state GST as we have in India. There's no state GST in Australia. GST is completely a federal tax, and land tax and payroll tax are state taxes. And pay as you go installments and pay as you go withholding. So I'll quickly give you a brief about what's a pay as you go installment tax. So for a layman, or just to for your easy reference, pay as you go installments is similar to advanced tax installments that we have in India. So every quarter when you lodge a BAS, you are required to pay the advance tax along with the quarterly BAS lodgements. BAS as in the business activity statement that we discussed earlier. So it's similar to advance tax, and pay as you go withholding is similar to TDS on salary. So the concept of TDS is only limited to salary in Australia. There is no TDS. There are very few instances where there is TDS in Australia on other types of transactions like we have in India. Let's say like we have on professional fees we have to deduct TDS and all those things. But then in Australia the TDS is limited to salary. So if you are an employer and if you are paying salaries to your employees, then you also need to withhold or deduct the TDS from the salary and then deposit to the ATO, the government. So that these are the different types of major types of taxes in Australia. And now the timeline for setting up a legal entity, or should I say, setting up a company in Australia. So we have divided this into two different types of categories. If there are no foreign stakeholders involved in a company. So let's say if you want to open a company in Australia, but then if you are a shareholder or you are a director being an Indian resident based in India, then that would mean that there is a foreign stakeholder involved in Australia in the company. But if there is no foreign stakeholder, if it's a local company with a local resident director and a local resident shareholder only, then it can be there are two different scenarios. So one is auto approved by ATO. So when you open a company in Australia, uh, when you submit the application for the company, it can either be auto approved or else it can go under manual review. So normally it gets auto approved, and in that case the registration of the company is immediate. So within 5 minutes you will get an email that your company is registered. So normally it's auto approved when there is a the name of the company is is something that is not very unusual for them, where they need to do some manual review, and otherwise normally it gets approved. And if there's if they feel that they have got different checkpoints, so if something in their system, so if the system catches something that's not as per the checkpoint, then it will go under manual review. And if it goes under manual review, then it will take up to 28 business days for your company to get registered. So again, when you open a company in India, the identification of a company is called CIN, the corporate identification number. Similar to this, in Australia, when you open a company, you get a number called ACN. So it's called Australian Company Number. So ACN is an identification number for the companies in Australia. And let's say if you have got a foreign stakeholder involved, so let's say if you are based in India and you want to be a shareholder of a company in Australia, then in this case there is a possibility that there's no fixed timeline over here. Again, this is the same. If the name gets auto approved or something like that, the company formation is easy. Even if there's a foreign stakeholder involved, the company formation can still be done in the same way it's done without a foreign stakeholder. But then after opening a company, you need to also apply for an ABN. So similar to GST number in India, there's a number called Australian Business Number (ABN), which you need to apply for the company after opening a company. So the ABN issue the to get an ABN, there is no fixed timeline if there are foreign stakeholders involved, because they require for the foreign stakeholders to certify the documents and then post it to them, and then they will review it and then approve it. So this is a lengthy process where you need to get your identity documents certified with a notary in India, and then it has to be posted via any speed post or Indian post to the given address of ATO, and then they will review it and then approve it. So there is no fixed timeline and it's a lengthy process. So normally, what we suggest to our clients is that if they have someone trustworthy in Australia, if they know someone trustworthy in Australia, then in that case, uh, and if they have an urgency to open a company because they want to start a business, then they should first open the company with only with the local Australian person as the director and shareholder. And once the company is opened and up and running, once you have an AB and once you've got your bank account opened, after that you can add yourself uh, in the company as a director and shareholder. So yeah, that is how we proceed. But if you do not have any, if you do not have any rush to open a company, and if you're okay with whatever time it takes, normally let's say for me, it took us when we started our company in Australia in 2021 or 22. It took us around 1.5 month to get the ABN, because our structure was such a way where it was becoming very difficult to make them understand and prove the identity to them. So yeah, and so basically, what you need to consider before opening a company or at the time of opening a company in Australia. So as mentioned, uh, if you are in India, if you are based in India and if you are an Indian resident, then before you invest in a company in Australia. So when I say invest, I'm talking about the shareholders' capital. So even in Australia, the company can be opened with even a $1 capital, but before investing even a $1 in Australia, uh, you need to comply with the RBI or the FEMA compliances. So as mentioned that we have like our group involves the Indian CA firm as well. So one of my partners, his name is Virag, and he specializes in cross border transactions, and he helps a lot of our clients to comply with the RBI and FEMA compliances. So obviously, all of these services, moving forward, if you have any requirements or questions, then obviously we can help you with all these kind of services. And another requirement is a resident director. So a resident director is mandatory in Australia. So this is something that is one of the major, let's say a drawback, but not a drawback if you have someone in Australia. So if you know someone trustworthy in Australia who are willing to act as a resident director for your company, then that's the best scenario possible. So you can have someone who is a resident director, but then the 100% shareholding can be with you, so that you do not make them owners of the company, but they just act as resident directors uh, to act on your behalf with different types of stakeholders in Australia, like the ATO or the ASIC, or the ASIC or the ATO or any other governing authorities. So, but if you do not have a resident, if you do not have someone in Australia who can act as a resident director for your company, then we do also do provide this kind of services. But then, obviously, since we are acting as resident director, it's a major, let's say, risk that we are taking, because we do not know what a company does, and we do not have a control on their business. So we need to get a lot of indemnity insurances and help from solicitors and everything, and that is why it will cost around 10,000 Australian dollars per annum, a recurring basis, to act as a resident director for a company in Australia. And another requirement is to have a local Australian address. So when you open a company in Australia, it is mandatory to have a registered office of that company in Australia, which is a local Australian address. And you need to have someone who can receive the documents, or at least check the mailboxes and then forward the documents to you. So this can again, uh, a residential address or a home address in Australia can also be a registered office address in Australia. So if you have someone who in Australia, then their residence can also be a registered office address for your company. And if not, then we also provide a registered office address for you guys, and we can manage those things for you. Just a second. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so we can also provide a registered office address for a fee, and but the fees for acting as a registered office address are nominal. It's $500 per annum for the entire year, and then we take care of your um, all the communication on the post that is received, and then we also act as your SEK. We are also registered ASIC agents, just like we have company secretaries in India. There are registered ASIC agents in Australia. So we are also registered ASIC agents. So all the communication from the ASIC will be directed to us if we are your nominated agents for the company. And before starting a company, you need to have clarity about what kind of company you want to open. But again, normally if you are in India and if you want to start a company, you will obviously start with a PTY limited company, and which is a private or a proprietary company. Then you need to have a company name. You need to decide a company name, and then see the same way we can check the availability of a name on MCA in India. Similarly, we can check the company name for you before we start the application process for the company. And you need to have clarity about the share structure. What kind of share structure do you want? And as mentioned earlier, you can start a company with even $1 as the share capital of the company. And similarly, you can have any kind of share structure which is suitable to your scenario. and list of office holders. So when I say a list of office holders, you need to decide who will be acting as the director, or who will be acting as a resident director, and if there's a foreign director, who will be acting as a foreign director, who will be acting as a secretary or a chairman. So secretary and chairman can be the same person as the resident director or a foreign director as well. A same person can also act as a director as well as secretary or a chairman, and who will be the contact person for the ATO. So that is also office holder. And what are your business activity details? So when you apply for a company or when you apply for an ABN, which is the Australian business number, you need to tell them what kind of business activity you will be conducting in the company. And as and when you move forward, if there's a change of business activity in the company, then you need to also report to the to the ATO that there's a change in the business activity that you are conducting from the company. So these are the initial compliances, and once once the company is registered, as mentioned earlier, you will receive an ACN, which is an Australian company number. And after receiving an ACN, you also need to apply for the company's ABN, which is an Australian business number. Australian business number is mandatory to do a business in Australia and to issue invoices. So when you issue an invoice from the company, the invoice must have your ABN on it, and you also need to have a TFN. So TFN is called tax file number. So tax file number is similar to PAN number in Australia. So each and every person in Australia who is not a minor needs to have a TFN, which is a tax file number. So tax file number is mandatory for companies, for individuals, or even for partnership or trust. And again, you also need to have a GST registration. So GST registration is mandatory only if you cross or expect to cross the turnover by $75,000 per annum. Until then, similarly, I think so in India we have got a limit or threshold of 20 lakhs. Similarly, there is a threshold of $75,000 in turnover in order to register your ABN for GST. So in Australia, there is no separate GST identification number. Your ABN is only your GST identification number, but you can look up online, or anyone can look up online whether your company is registered for GST or not. Based on there's a portal called ABN lookup. So it's called that your ABN is registered for GST or whether it's not registered for GST. And you also need to get PAYG registration. So PAYG is the full form is pay as you go. Pay as you go, and pay as you go is like as mentioned that it's either advance tax or TDS on salary. So if you are planning to have any employees in your company and pay them salaries, then it is mandatory to get a PAYG registration as well. So again, this is not a separate number. It's just that when you get these registrations, GST or PAYG, your ABN will have those registrations. And what are the recurring annual compliances once you open a company in Australia? So, uh, as mentioned earlier, one is a business activity statement, also known as BAS. So, a BAS report is can either be or on a monthly or a quarterly basis. Just like we have GST returns or TDS returns in India, we have to file BAS returns in Australia, and it can be monthly or quarterly depending on your turnover. And in a BAS, it's a combined report. So you will report your GST liability, so your GST on sales minus your GST on purchase, which is the net GST payable. Then your pay as you go withholding tax, which is similar to TDS on salary, and then your pay as you go installment, which is similar to your advance tax installment. And there are other taxes also involved in the bars, which are not very much used in our day-to-day routine, but some which is applicable to few of the companies in Australia, which are called wine equalization tax, fringe benefit tax, luxury car tax, or even there's a concept called fuel tax credit. So all of these different things are included in a business activity statement, which needs to be lodged. Most of them are on a quarterly basis. Very few companies have need to lodge on a monthly basis. And again, so just like India, the normal tax return needs to be lodged on an annual basis. So the financial year in Australia is from 1st July to 30th of June. In India, we have got 1st April to 31st of March. Similarly, it's from 1st July to 30th of June. But the benefit, but again, one more benefit of doing a business in Australia or opening a company in Australia is once the financial year ends on 30th of June, you get up to 15th of May for the next year. So that is almost 11 months you get to file your tax return. So again, my partners in India, they very much envy us because in Australia we are never very much uh, busy with the deadlines or doing late hours in the office or something. It's a very you can have a good work-life balance if you're working in Australia or for the Australian clients. So it's very smooth going process, and 11 months is a very sufficient time for you to make the lodgements of the companies for your tax return. And one more requirement is that when you open a company in Australia, as mentioned, that it is governed by ASIC, which is similar to MCA. So uh, in ASIC, they send you a annual company statement. The company statement basically will have the details of the shareholders or the members of the company, as well as the details of the directors, and even the shareholding pattern, like which member owns how many shares and what is the paid up amount and um, what's the percentage of shareholding of a particular member. So every year you need to confirm these details so that the ASIC can maintain those details in the record. And along with this, you also need to do a director's declaration for the solvency of the company. So if we are acting as your registered ASIC agent or nominated ASIC agent, then we process these things from our end, and then we just reimburse the fees from you. So every year, if you have a company in Australia, you need to pay annual SIC review fee of $321, and this also increases every year. So this $321 is for the period of starting from 1st July 2024 to 30th June 2025, which is the current financial year. In every year, this will increase normally in the ratio of the inflation that's going on in Australia. So it's around $10 to $15 increase every year in the annual ASIC review fee. So that's it from my end. These are the major uh, considerations that you need to make if you are planning to start a company in Australia. So yeah, Kapil bhai, I think so. That's it from my end. Hello. Yeah. So I think so. Kapil Bhai is facing some technical issues. So yeah, let's do a quick Q&A session. If you guys have any questions, then just you can mention in the chat box, and yeah, and then we can just wrap up today's session if we are done with this. And I think so. I'll share. I do have my contact details and my email ID. So if you guys need to discuss anything further with me, I'll be happy to discuss over a call. Yeah, so if you guys have any questions, just I'll wait for a couple of minutes. And if there are no questions, then we can just quickly wrap up the session. And yeah, these are the contact details. Yeah, so the contact details are mentioned here. So we have got a question from Rahul, who's asking what's the annual cost of managing a company of 10 lakhs turnover. So I think so 10 lakhs turnover will come to 20,000 Australian dollars. So which is not a very huge turnover. So the annual cost would be around, let's say, $321 as mentioned for the ASIC fees, and the accountant fees are around $1,300, including we charge normally $1,300 per annum, which includes the quarterly bars lodgements, which includes your GST, PAYG, and everything, as well as your year-end tax return and financial reporting. So it's around 1,300 Australian dollars plus 321 for this. So yeah, maximum $1,600 per annum. And there is another question that we have got. Can an Indian resident take a loan from Australian entity? So yeah, definitely. Can an Indian, but this will, I think so. This is something that I think so. My Indian counterpart partner will need to give clarity to you about, because Australia, from the Australian perspective, the Australian entity can give loans to foreigners. But what are the implications in India for the Indian resident? That is something that my partner will need to. So you can give me a call, and then I can connect you with my partner, and he can help you with this question. And yeah, Pratik is asking if the session is available later on. Yes, we will be uploading this session on YouTube, and you can have a look at it afterwards. It will be on Talreja and Talreja LHC's YouTube channel. And for a 10 lakh dollar turnover, sorry, yeah, so 10 lakh dollar turnover, it will be, so 10 lakh dollar is $1 million turnover. So that will be around $3,000, including everything for the entire year. So this is something that we charge. The accountants who are based in Australia, they might charge you more than this, definitely. But since our operational team is based in India, we do have a head office in Sydney, and we have one partner and one admin staff based in Sydney. But I am based in India, and since our entire operations team, we have got a team of 30 people who dedicatedly work for the Australian clients. And since we have a team in India, uh, we charge we provide very cost effective services, and yeah, we that can be done within by $3,000 per annum. And so we have another question: if someone is there on spouse student visa, can he create company as a resident or not? The answer is yes, because even if there is someone who is on a student visa, or a spouse of someone who is on a student visa, they can create a company in Australia because they are still tax residents for Australia. So when I say tax resident in of Australia, so the answer, and what could be the cost to incorporate a company with Indian and Australian resident? So, Mr. Nikhil, to answer your question, when you open a company in Australia, around $600 to $700 are need to be paid to the ASIC, as well as we use third party aggregators for opening a company. So the third party aggregator fees plus the let's say the third party aggregator fees plus the ASIC fees, which needs to be paid to the government authority ASIC, is around $700, and we charge $400 for a company as our service fee. And because that company includes a foreign resident as well, if it's a company which only includes the local stakeholders in Australia, then we charge $300 as our service fee. Otherwise, we charge $400 as our service fee. And we have got another question, which is which part of Australia is best to set up? I think so. Just to you set up a company, like when you say which part of Australia, do you, if you mean that what should be the registered address of the company, then it doesn't matter if it's any part. But if you are asking to provide your services and do the business in Australia, then Sydney is the major business hub in Australia. So similar to in India we have got Mumbai. In Australia, Sydney is something which has got the majority of business. And then obviously there are other cities like Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide, which are the upcoming markets where we Indians are doing a very good business, and we have got a lot of clients in these parts of the country as well. So the major all major cities like Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, Brisbane, and Perth. These are the major cities where if you start a business anywhere, it's very good. And can we do GST compliance from India? Yeah, any compliance can be done from India if you are if you got the appropriate licenses. Um, so you need to be a registered tax agent if you want to lodge anything, or else you need to be the owner of the or the owner or the director of the company. So yeah, it can be done from India because it's everything is online. So you just need to go to your ATO portal and do the lodgements. But again, to get access to the ATO portal as a director of the company, it is very difficult to prove the to prove the identity. And I would recommend that you do all those compliances either through someone who is a resident in Australia, or else through an accountant like us. So again, we have got question which software is used for accounting work. So the major softwares in Australia are, one is called Zero, XERO Zero, and other one is called MYOB, which is also commonly known as MYOB, or the full form is Mind Your Own Business, MYOB. And the third major software is QuickBooks, which is a global software, as you all know. ASIC fee for incorporation of a company is $576 one time fee, and then recurring fee of $321 every year. And how to become a registered tax agent in Australia? So, registered tax to become a registered tax agent in Australia, there are different types of. So, the governing authority for the registered tax agents in Australia is called Tax Practitioners Board. So, you can just you can note down the website. It's called tpb.com.au, sorry, tpb.gov.au, or else you can just Google Tax Practitioners Board Australia, and all the requirements to become a registered tax agent in Australia are mentioned very in a very user friendly way on the website of TPB. And just to give you a brief, you need to there are different requirements. So two requirements are, one is you need to fulfill their primary qualification requirement, then you need to fulfill the secondary qualification requirement, and the third parties, you need to have a relevant experience under a registered tax agent in Australia, and that tax agent needs to give you a experience certificate of at least 12 months, and then you make the application, and then they will have a look at your application and approve. And all the cost that I'm saying is Australian dollars. Yeah, sorry, I should have cleared that earlier. Everything is in Australian dollars, which is around 55 Indian rupees right now. Yeah, I think so. We are done with the questions. Just yeah, we'll wait for a couple of minutes, and then if we are done with the questions, then we can wrap up the session. And my contact details are there on the screen, so you can just get in touch with me at any time if you have any further questions or if you need to discuss anything. All right then. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining today's session. I'll be wrapping up the session now, and yeah, hope to see you guys again in any of the future webinars. And I think so. Kapil Bhai's contact details are not visible. I'll just maybe can you see my screen or is it visible now? Yes, the PPT will be shared, and the session will also be there on YouTube. ACCA can practice in Australia or not? So, Pratik, uh, basically, whether you are a CA in Australia or a CPA in Australia or an ACCA, in order to make income tax or bars or any kind of lodgement with the ATO, any kind of tax return with the ATO, you need to be a registered tax agent, and then only you can do lodgements for others. And Kapil bhai, can you share my contact details in the chat if it's possible? Because I think so some people are not able to see the screen. Let me. Okay, perfect. So yeah, everything will be shared via email or WhatsApp. Even my contact details and the PPT and the webinar recording. I assume the webinar recording as well. So all right. Okay then. I'll be leaving the session and thank you so much everyone for your time today. And yeah, hope to stay in touch. Thank you.